Commander Marcus Cole stood at the viewing window of the orbital station and watched the alien ship emerge from the darkness of space like a silver blade cutting through black silk, and he felt his heart beat faster than it had during any battle he had ever fought. The Valorian vessel was beautiful in a way that made human ships look like children's toys, and Marcus understood why Earth's leaders had agreed to this strange alliance, because humanity needed friends in a galaxy that had suddenly become very large and very dangerous. 3 months ago, Earth had made first contact with the Valorian Dominion, an empire that stretched across 1,000 star systems and was ruled by an immortal empress and her 7 daughters. And now Marcus was about to marry one of those daughters in a political union that would bind their 2 peoples together. He had expected to meet one of the elder princesses, the powerful women who commanded vast fleets and made decisions that affected billions of lives. But when the Valorian ambassador had announced his bride's name, the alien's face had shown something that might have been amusement. "You will marry Princess Alindra," the ambassador had said, "the 7th and youngest daughter of Empress Silithera." Marcus had done his research after that meeting, and what he found troubled him deeply, because while the other 6 princesses appeared in countless records and broadcasts, Alindra was almost invisible, mentioned only in passing, shown only in the background of family portraits, and never quoted or interviewed. It was as if she barely existed. The airlock hissed open behind him, and Marcus turned to face his fate with the same courage he had shown in a dozen battles, but nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. The Valorian delegation entered first, tall and silver-skinned beings with eyes like polished gems, their movements graceful and precise, their faces showing no emotion. Emotion at all, and behind them came a smaller figure who seemed to shrink away from the light. Princess Alindra was not what Marcus had expected. Where her people stood tall and proud, she kept her head down and her shoulders hunched, and where their skin gleamed like polished metal, hers seemed dull and almost gray. And when she finally raised her eyes to meet his, Marcus saw something that made his soldier's instincts scream a warning. He saw fear. Not the fear of meeting a stranger, not the nervousness of a bride on her wedding day, but the deep and terrible fear of a creature that had been hurt many times and expected to be hurt again. "Commander Cole," the lead ambassador said in a voice like wind chimes, "I present to you Princess Alindra, 7th daughter of the Eternal Throne, and your bride." Marcus stepped forward and did something that seemed to surprise everyone in the room, including Alindra herself, because he bowed deeply and spoke in a pageant, gentle voice. Alindra's violet eyes went wide, and she looked at him as if he had spoken in a language she couldn't understand. And for a long moment she said nothing at all. "We calmly not at all. You are kind to say so," she finally whispered, and her voice was so soft that Marcus had to lean closer to hear her. The wedding ceremony was brief and strange, conducted according to Valorian traditions that Marcus did not fully understand. But he noticed how Alindra flinched whenever someone moved too quickly near her, and how she kept glancing at her handmaidens as if seeking permission to breathe. Those handmaidens bothered Marcus more than anything else, because they watched Alindra with cold and unblinking eyes, and they stood too close to her, and they touched her arm or shoulder in ways that seemed more like control than comfort. When the ceremony ended, Valorian delegation departed with formal words and empty smiles, leaving Marcus alone with his new wife in the quarters they would share, and the silence between them felt heavy and strange. "Are you hungry?" Marcus asked, because he did not know what else to say. Alindra shook her head quickly, almost frantically, and took a step back from him. "I require nothing," she said. "I will stay in my chamber and cause you no trouble, and you may live your life as if I am not here." Marcus frowned at those words, because they sounded rehearsed, as if she had been told to say them, and he recognized the tone of someone who had learned to make themselves small and invisible to avoid pain. "Alindra," he said gently, "this is your home now too, and I would like us to know each other, because we are going to spend our lives together." She stared at him with those haunted violet eyes, and Marcus could see that she did not believe him. Kindness to end, and the cruelty to begin, and that broke something in his heart. "I will not hurt you," he said. "I promise you that." "You cannot promise such a thing," she replied, "because everyone hurts me eventually, and it is simply the nature of what I am." Before Marcus could ask what she meant by those strange words, Alindra retreated to her private chamber and sealed the door behind her, leaving him alone with more questions than answers. The weeks that followed were difficult and confusing, because Alindra kept her distance and spoke only when necessary, but Marcus was patient and consistent, and he made sure to treat her with respect and kindness every single day. He learned small things about her, like how she loved to look at the stars through the observation deck windows, and how she hummed strange melodies when she thought no one was listening, and how she always seemed surprised when he asked her opinion about anything. Troubling things, like how she never ate in front of others, and how she disappeared for hours into a sealed chamber that her handmaidens guarded jealously, and how she sometimes emerged from that chamber with shadows under her eyes and trembling hands. One night, Marcus woke to find Alindra standing at the foot of his bed, watching him with an expression he could not read. And when he asked if something was wrong, she simply shook her head and returned to her own room without a word. He lay awake for a long time after that, thinking about the strange woman he had married and the secrets she clearly carried. And he wondered what had been done to her to make her so afraid of simple kindness. In the darkness of her chamber, Alindra pressed her hands against the cold wall and tried to control her breathing, because the human confused her in ways she had never experienced before. He was supposed to ignore her, or use her, or treat her as the disposable thing she had always been told she was, but instead he smiled at her and asked about her day and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. It was a trick, she told herself. It had to be a trick, because no one was kind without wanting something in return. And when he finally showed his true nature, the pain would be worse for having hoped. But still, some small part of her wondered what it would be like if his kindness was real. "He does not know what I am," she whispered to herself in the darkness, "and he can never know, because if he learns the truth, he will look at me the way everyone else does, and I cannot bear to see that look in his eyes." She closed her eyes and felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her soul, the burden she had carried since childhood, the secret that defined her entire existence. Tomorrow she would be stronger, she promised herself. Tomorrow she would remember her place and stop hoping for impossible things. But tonight, just for a moment, she allowed herself to wonder what it might feel like to be loved. 3 months had passed since the wedding, and Marcus had grown used to the strange rhythm of his life with Alindra. The way she appeared and disappeared like a ghost, the way she watched him from doorways as if studying a creature she did not understand. Their relationship was not warm, but it was no longer cold either. And sometimes she would sit with him in the observation deck, and they would watch the stars together, in comfortable silence. Marcus had stopped asking questions about her past, because every question made her retreat further into herself, and instead he simply showed her through his actions that she was safe with him. But he could not ignore the signs that something was terribly wrong. Alindra grew thinner with each passing week, and the gray pallor of her skin became more pronounced, and sometimes he caught her wincing in pain when she thought no one was watching, and her handmaidens seemed to watch her with increasing intensity. Night, Marcus could not sleep, and he wandered through the station, seeking the peace that the stars always gave him. And that was when he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was a soft cry of pain, barely audible, coming from the sealed chamber where Alindra spent so many hours. And Marcus moved toward it without thinking, driven by an instinct to protect that he could not ignore. The door was unlocked, which surprised him, and he pushed it open, and stepped into darkness lit only by strange glowing symbols on the walls, and what he saw made him freeze in horror. Alindra lay on the floor in a pool of silver blood, her body twisted in agony, and her back was covered with wounds that made no sense, because they were not random cuts, but perfect geometric patterns carved into her flesh. "No," she gasped when she saw him. "You cannot be here. You must go, please." But Marcus was already kneeling beside her, already lifting her gently in his arms, already carrying her to the medical bay, despite her weak protests. And his mind was racing with questions and fury in equal measure. He treated her wounds himself, not trusting the Valorian handmaidens, who appeared at the door with cold eyes and colder demands. And he sealed the medical bay against them, and stayed by Alindra's side until she regained consciousness. "You saw," she said when her eyes opened, and her voice was empty and defeated. "I saw," Marcus confirmed, "and now you are going to tell me what is happening to you. Because those wounds were not accidents, and I will not pretend otherwise." Alindra was silent for a long time, and tears that shimmered like liquid silver ran down her cheeks. And Marcus waited, with patience he did not feel. "Do you know why my people seem so calm and logical?" she finally asked. "I assumed it was simply your nature," Marcus replied. "It is not our nature," Alindra said. "It is our choice, or rather, it is the choice made for us by our ancestors long ago, because they believed that emotions were weakness, that feelings were poison that corrupted rational thought." She sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in her back, and Marcus helped her without comment. "But emotions cannot simply disappear," she continued. "They must go somewhere, and so our ancestors created a solution, a way to remove unwanted feelings from the minds of the powerful, and store them somewhere else." A terrible understanding began to form in Marcus's mind, and he felt sick with it. In the royal bloodline, the youngest child is designated as the vessel of sorrows, Alindra said, and her voice was steady now, as if she was reciting something she had been told many times. "From the moment of my birth, I was marked to receive the negative emotions of my family, their grief and fear and rage and shame. All of it flows into me through the ritual sigils carved into my flesh, geometric scars on her back with new understanding and new horror. You carry the emotional pain of your entire family," he said, and it was not a question. "Not just my family," Alindra corrected him. "I carry the accumulated trauma of 7 generations of Valorian royalty. Every sorrow they did not want to feel, every fear they did not want to face, every dark emotion they chose to discard rather than process." "How long has this been happening to you?" Marcus asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "Since I was 4 years old," Alindra said. "That is when the first sigil was carved, and every year since then, the ritual has been repeated, and more pain has been added to what I already carry." Marcus stood up and walked to the window, because he needed a moment to control the rage that was building inside him, a rage unlike anything he had ever felt before. "Your mother allows this," he said. "Your sisters participate in this. They do not see it as cruelty," Alindra said. "They see it as necessity, as tradition, as the way things have always been and must always be. And I am not a person to them. I am a function, a tool designed for a specific purpose." "You are dying," Marcus said, and again it was not a question, because he could see the truth of it now, the way her body was slowly failing under the weight of centuries of compressed suffering. "Yes," Alindra said simply, "the vessel never lives long, because no single mind can hold so much pain forever. But it doesn't matter, because when I die, another will be born to take my place, and the cycle will continue." Marcus turned back to face her, and his eyes were hard with determination. "No," he said. Alindra blinked at him in confusion. "What do you mean, no?" she asked. "I mean that I will not accept this," Marcus said. I will not stand by and watch you die because your family decided to use you as an emotional garbage dump. And I will not pretend that this is acceptable just because it has been happening for a long time. You cannot change what I am, Alindra said. You cannot undo the sigils or remove the pain they have placed in me. And if you try to interfere, my mother will destroy you and Earth along with you. Marcus knelt before her and took her hands in his, and his grip was gentle, but his voice was fierce. On Earth we have a word for what they have done to you, he said. We call it abuse, and we do not tolerate it. Not from families, not from governments, not from anyone. And I swear to you that I will find a way to save you, or I will die trying. Alindra stared at him with wide eyes, and for the first time since he had known her, he saw something other than fear in her gaze. He saw hope, fragile and uncertain, but real. Why would you risk everything for me? She asked in a whisper. I am nothing. I have always been nothing. Are my wife, Marcus said, and you are a person who deserves to live without pain, and that is reason enough. He stood up and helped her to her feet, and he made a silent promise to himself that he would tear down the entire Valorian dominion if that was what it took to set her free. But first, he needed to learn everything there was to know about the technology that was killing her, and he knew exactly who to ask for help. Rest now, he told Alindra, and tomorrow we begin to fight back. She looked at him as if he had offered her a gift beyond price, and perhaps he had, because no one had ever fought for her before, and she did not know what to do with the strange warmth that filled her chest. It felt like something she had only experienced in dreams. Marcus worked in secret for weeks, sending encrypted messages to Earth's finest scientists and medical experts, sharing everything he had learned about the Valorian ritual and the sigils that were slowly killing his wife. The responses he received confirmed his worst fears and gave him his first real hope. Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's leading xenobiologist, was the first to understand what the Valorians had actually created. This is not magic or mysticism, she told Marcus through the secure channel. This is incredibly advanced biotechnology, and the sigils on your wife's body are organic circuits that force route emotional processing from multiple minds into a single recipient. Can it be reversed? Marcus asked, and he held his breath waiting for the answer. Theoretically, yes, Dr. Chen said, but you need to understand what will happen if we do this, because all of that suppressed emotion does not simply disappear. It will flow back to its original sources, and 7 generations of unfelt feelings will suddenly crash into minds that have never learned to process them. Marcus thought about the cold and perfect Valorian royals, about Alindra's 6 sisters who had lived their entire lives free from fear and grief and shame, and he found that he did not care what happened to them. Do it, he said. There is another problem, Dr. Chen warned. We need to get your wife to our facility on Titan without the Valorians knowing, because if they realize what we're planning, they will stop us, and I suspect they will do whatever is necessary to protect their precious system. Marcus looked across the room at Alindra, who sat by the window, watching the stars with tired eyes, and he made his decision. He would lie, cheat, and steal if he had to, and he would betray every diplomatic principle he had ever held sacred, because some things were more important than politics. Began his quiet rebellion against the alien empire that had hurt his wife. He started by compromising the surveillance systems that her handmaidens used to monitor her, replacing their feeds with loops of ordinary activity, while he and Alindra met in secret. He taught her things that no one had ever taught her before, simple things that humans learned as children, like how to name her emotions and speak them aloud, like how to breathe through pain instead of drowning in it, like how to accept comfort from another person without expecting a price. The first time Alindra laughed, really laughed, at a silly joke Marcus told her, she immediately covered her mouth and looked around in terror, as if expecting to be punished. It is permitted to laugh, Marcus told her gently. It is permitted to feel joy, and no one will hurt you for it. Not while I am here. The first time she cried, really cried, releasing some small fraction of the grief she carried, held her through the storm of it, and did not let go until she was calm again. "How do you do this?" she asked him afterward. "How do humans survive feeling so much without being destroyed by it?" "We do not survive alone," Marcus said. "We share our burdens with people who care about us, and together we are strong enough to carry what would crush us individually." Aelindra stared at him as if he had revealed the secret of the universe, and perhaps he had, because the Valorians had spent millennia running from their emotions, while humans had learned to embrace them, and that made all the difference. The first time she expressed anger, real anger, at what had been done to her, Marcus felt nothing but pride. "They used me," she said, and her voice shook with fury. "They carved me open like an animal, and filled me with their garbage, and told me it was an honor. And I believed them. I believed that I deserved nothing better. Said, 'You deserved love, and protection, and kindness, and what they gave you instead was cruelty dressed up as tradition.'" "I hate them," Aelindra whispered, and the words seemed to shock her even as she spoke them. "I hate my mother and my sisters, and everyone who stood by while I suffered." "That is okay," Marcus said. "That is a reasonable response to what they did, and feeling it does not make you evil, it makes you human." Aelindra looked at him with wonder in her eyes. "I am not human," she said. "No," Marcus agreed, "but maybe that is not such a bad thing to become." They grew closer with each passing day, and Marcus watched as Aelindra slowly transformed from a frightened ghost into something approaching a whole person. And he fell in love with her so gradually that he did not notice it happening until it was complete. One night, as they sat together in the observation deck, Aelindra took his hand in hers and held it tight. "Doing this?" she asked. "Why are you risking your life and your world for someone you barely know?" "Because where I come from," Marcus said, "we do not throw away the people who carry our pain, and we do not abandon the ones who need us, and we do not stand by while innocent people suffer, just because that is how things have always been." "That sounds exhausting," Aelindra said, but she was smiling. "It is," Marcus admitted, "but it is also what makes life worth living." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat in silence for a while, watching the stars spin slowly past the window. "I think I love you," Aelindra said quietly, "and that terrifies me more than anything else." "Why does it terrify you?" Marcus asked. "Because I have never had anything I was afraid to lose," she said, "and now I do." Marcus put his arm around her and held her close. "You will not lose me," he promised. "Whatever comes next, we face it. Together." But even as he spoke those words, warning alarms began to sound throughout the station, and Marcus knew that their time had run out. He looked at the tactical display and felt his heart sink, because dropping out of hyperspace directly above them was the largest Valorian warship he had ever seen, and it was followed by a dozen more. A message appeared on the communication screen, and Marcus recognized the face of Aelindra's eldest sister, Crown Princess Velatrix, whose eyes were cold, and whose voice was colder still. "Human," she said, "you have interfered with sacred Valorian traditions and corrupted a royal vessel, and the Empress herself has come to collect what belongs to us. So return our sister immediately, or we will take her by force and reduce your pathetic planet to ash." Marcus looked at Aelindra and saw the fear returning to her eyes, the old terror that she had only just begun to overcome. "What do we do?" she asked. Squared his shoulders and faced the screen with defiance in his heart. "We fight," he said. The Valorian armada hung in space, like a collection of silver blades, beautiful and deadly, and Marcus counted 13 warships surrounding the tiny diplomatic station where he stood with his wife. Earth's defense fleet was scrambling to respond, but they were hours away, and even when they arrived, they would be hopelessly outmatched by Valorian technology. "There is no point in fighting," Alindra said, and her voice was hollow with despair. "They will destroy everything you love, and in the end they will still take me." "Maybe," Marcus admitted, "but I am not going to make it easy for them." He opened a communication channel, not just to the Valorian fleet, but to every ship and station and planet that could receive the signal. Because if he was going to lose this battle, he was going to make sure the entire galaxy knew why. "Empress Silithara," he said, "I know you can hear me, and I know you have come to reclaim your daughter. This station, there is something that everyone in this galaxy needs to see." He activated the display behind him, showing the images that Dr. Chen had helped him compile. The medical scans that revealed the organic technology embedded in Alindra's body. The recordings of her screaming during the ritual that carved new sigils into her flesh. "This is what the Valorian Dominion does to its own children," Marcus said. "This is the sacred tradition that they claim gives them the right to rule 1,000 worlds. And this is the truth they have hidden for centuries." The Empress's flagship transmitted a response, and Marcus saw for the first time the face of the ancient being who had ordered her youngest daughter to suffer. Silithara was beautiful in the way that a glacier is beautiful, cold and vast and utterly inhuman, and her silver eyes held no warmth at all. "You speak of things you do not understand, human," the Empress said. "Maintained the stability of our civilization for 7,000 years, and without it, the passions and fears of our ruling class would tear our empire apart." "So you admit it," Marcus said. "You admit that you have tortured your daughter since she was 4 years old, because you were too weak to face your own emotions." A ripple of something passed across the Empress's perfect face. Something that might have been anger, if she still remembered how to feel it. "The vessel is not tortured," she said. "She serves a sacred function, and through her sacrifice, billions of Valorian citizens live in peace and prosperity." "Ask her," Marcus said. "Ask Alindra if she feels honored by her sacred function." He stepped aside, and Alindra moved into view of the transmission, and for a long moment she stared at her mother's face on the screen. "I feel nothing but pain," Alindra said, and her voice was stronger than Marcus had ever heard it. "I have felt nothing but pain since I was old enough to remember. And you put it there, Mother. You and my sisters poured your darkness into me and walked away clean, while I drowned in it." "You are hysterical," the Empress said dismissively. "Clearly this human has corrupted your mind with his primitive emotional excess." "He taught me that I am allowed to feel," Alindra said. "He taught me that I am a person, not a container. And he showed me something you never did in all my years of existence." "And what is that?" the Empress asked. "Kindness," Alindra said. "Simple kindness freely given, with nothing expected in return." Behind the Empress, her 6 other daughters stood in perfect formation, their faces as cold and blank as their mother's. But Marcus noticed something strange. The second eldest daughter's hand was trembling. The third was blinking rapidly, as if fighting back tears she did not understand. The fifth had taken a small step backward, away from her. "Mother!" Away from the screen where Alindra's scarred back was still displayed. "Something is happening to them," Marcus whispered to Alindra. "They are feeling the echoes," she replied. "The connection works both ways to some degree, and they are beginning to sense what I have always carried for them." Marcus made a decision in that moment. A gamble that could end in disaster, but might be their only chance. "Alindra," he said, "show them. Show them everything." She understood immediately what he was asking, and fear flashed across her face. "If I open the connection fully, I do not know what will happen," she said. "Neither do I," Marcus admitted. "But right now, your sisters see you as a thing, a function, not a person, and if you show them the truth of what you have experienced, maybe that will change." Alindra closed her eyes and reached deep within herself, to the place where the sigils connected her to her family. and she opened the gates that she had always kept closed. The effect was immediate and devastating. Crown Princess Bellatrix, the eldest and most controlled of the sisters, dropped to her knees with a cry of anguish, as 7 generations of suppressed grief crashed into her mind. The second sister began to weep, great shuddering sobs that she could not understand or control. The third started screaming, reliving fears she had never faced, terrors she had simply discarded into her youngest sibling. The fourth and fifth collapsed into each other's arms, shaking with emotions they had no words for. Even the sixth, who had always been the cruelest to Elindra, fell silent and still, her face twisted with shame and horror, as she finally understood what she had done. Only the Empress remained standing, her ancient will strong enough to resist the flood, but even she swayed, and her perfect mask cracked just enough to show the turmoil beneath. "Stop this," Silithara commanded, but her voice had lost its certainty. "No," Elindra said, "you gave this to me, all of you, and now I am giving it back, because I will not carry your burdens anymore." Crown Princess Bellatrix raised her head, and her eyes were wet with tears she had not shed in 500 years. "Sister," she said, and the words seemed to hurt her, "I did not know. I truly did not know." "You did not want to know," Elindra replied. "None of you wanted to know, because knowing would have meant feeling, and feeling was too frightening." Bellatrix stood slowly, and she turned to face her mother, and there was something new in her expression, something dangerous. "This ends now," the Crown Princess said. "The vessel protocol ends now." "You dare challenge me?" the Empress demanded. "I dare do what I should have done centuries ago," Bellatrix said, and she drew her ceremonial blade, not pointing it at the humans, but at her own mother. "Doing?" Silithara asked, and for the first time in 1,000 years, her voice held an emotion that Marcus recognized: fear. "I am choosing to feel," Bellatrix said. "I am choosing to be a sister instead of a monster, and I am choosing to end this cruelty that we have called tradition for far too long." The other princesses rose to stand beside her, 5 sisters united against their mother for the first time in history, their faces wet with tears and twisted with new emotions. But their resolve was clear. "You will regret this," the Empress said, but she was backing away now, and her guards looked uncertain. "Perhaps," Bellatrix agreed, "but at least we will feel our regret instead of making Elindra feel it for us." She gestured to her ship's commander, and the weapons that had been pointed at the diplomatic station slowly turned away. "Sister," Bellatrix said, addressing Elindra directly, "I cannot undo what has been done to you, and I cannot expect your forgiveness, but I can promise you this: you will never be used as a vessel again, not while I live." Elindra stared at the screen, at the sisters who had tormented her through their indifference, and she found that she did not have words for what she felt. But Marcus did. "That is a start," he said, "but if you truly want to make things right, then you need to let us help you, because humans have spent our entire existence learning to live with our emotions, and that is something we can teach you." Bellatrix looked at him with something that might have been respect. "You are a strange species," she said. "We prefer to think of ourselves as emotionally advanced," Marcus replied, and despite everything, he smiled. 1 year had passed since the confrontation above Neptune, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Empress Silithara was not dead, but she was no longer in power, sealed in stasis by her own daughters until they could decide what to do with a mother who had committed crimes they were only beginning to understand. Crown Princess Bellatrix ruled now, though she insisted on being called regent rather than empress, because she said that titles felt different when you actually felt the weight of them. The vessel protocol had been formally abolished, and the organic technology that had been used to transfer emotions was studied, documented, and destroyed, so that no Valorian child would ever suffer as Alindra had suffered. But the damage to Alindra herself could not be undone so easily. She spent months in recovery at the human medical facility on Titan, surrounded by doctors and therapists who had never treated an alien patient before, but who approached her case with determination and compassion. The suppressed emotions of 7 generations did not simply disappear when the protocol ended, and Alindra had to learn how to process feelings that had been accumulating inside her for her entire life. There were days when she could not stop crying, days when rage consumed her so completely that she could barely speak, days when fear paralyzed her and she could not leave her room. Marcus stayed with her through all of it. "You do not have to be here," she told him once during a particularly difficult episode. "You did not sign up for this when you agreed to marry me." "I signed up for better and worse," Marcus replied. "And this is worse, but it will not last forever. And when better comes, I plan to be here for that too." She looked at him with wonder, still not quite believing that someone could love her without conditions, without expectations. "You are the strangest human I have ever met," she said. "That is probably true," Marcus agreed. "But you are also the strangest Valorian I have ever met. So we match." Slowly, painfully, Alindra began to heal. She learned techniques that human therapists had developed over centuries, ways to sit with difficult emotions without being overwhelmed by them, ways to express pain through words and art and movement so that it did not fester inside. She made friends among the human staff at the facility, people who did not know or care about her royal status, who saw her simply as a person trying to get better. She discovered that she loved gardening, the simple act of nurturing living things and watching them grow, and she spent hours in the botanical dome creating a garden that bloomed with flowers from a dozen different worlds. And she fell more deeply in love with her husband every single day. Marcus had changed too, transformed by the experience of fighting for something more important than politics or duty. He had resigned his commission in Earth's diplomatic corps, choosing instead to work with the newly formed Human Valorian Counseling Initiative, helping other Valorians learn to process the emotions they had suppressed for so long. It turned out that humans were uniquely qualified for this work, because they had been practicing emotional intelligence for their entire existence as a species. And what came naturally to them was revolutionary to beings who had spent millennia running from their own feelings. "I do not understand how you survive," Regent Bellatrix said to Marcus during one of her visits to Titan. "Feeling everything all the time, carrying your own pain instead of giving it to someone else." "We do not survive in spite of our emotions," Marcus told her. "We survive because of them. And grief teaches us what we value, and fear teaches us what to protect, and anger teaches us what to fight for. And love?" Bellatrix asked, glancing at her youngest sister, who was laughing at something one of the human gardeners had said. "Love teaches us that some things are worth any cost," Marcus said. Bellatrix was silent for a long moment, watching Alindra, seeing her youngest sister truly happy for perhaps the first time ever. "I owe her a debt I can never repay," the regent said quietly. "We all do, and I am only beginning to understand how terrible that debt truly is." "Then do not try to repay it," Marcus suggested. "Just do better, and build something better, and make sure that no one ever has to suffer the way she suffered again." Bellatrix nodded slowly, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that would have been impossible a year ago. He saw determination mixed with compassion, strength tempered by understanding, power guided by feeling. The Valorians were changing, and humans were helping them change, not through force, conquest, but through the simple act of teaching them how to feel. 2 years after the confrontation, Alindra stood before a joint assembly of human and Valorian representatives, preparing to give a speech that would be broadcast to both civilizations. Marcus watched from the front row, his heart swelling with pride as the woman he loved stepped up to address the galaxy. She was not the frightened ghost he had married. Not anymore. She stood tall and confident, her silver skin glowing with health, her violet eyes bright with purpose, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of everything she had survived. "I was born to be a vessel," she began, "a container for the pain that my family did not want to feel, and I was told that this was my purpose, my duty, my only value in the universe." She paused, looking out at the audience, at the humans and Valorians sitting side by side. "I believed that lie for most of my life," she continued. "Believed that I deserved nothing more than suffering, that I was not a person but a function, that my pain was simply the price of my existence." Her eyes found Marcus in the crowd, and she smiled. "And then I met a human who taught me a different truth," she said, "a truth that his species has known since they first walked under the stars of their homeworld, that no one should carry their burdens alone." The assembly was silent, hanging on her every word. "Humans are not stronger than us," Alindra said. "They are not smarter, or more powerful, or more advanced, but they understand something that we forgot long ago, something that makes them the most remarkable species in this galaxy." She took a deep breath. "They understand that emotions are not weakness to be discarded, but strength to be shared," she said. "They understand that grief and fear and anger are not poison, but teachers, that feeling pain is not failure, but proof that you are alive." Looked at her sisters, who sat together in the Valorian delegation. Their faces wet with tears, they no longer tried to hide. "My family tried to throw away their darkness," Alindra said, "and in doing so, they threw away their light as well, because you cannot have one without the other, and you cannot truly live if you refuse to truly feel." She returned her gaze to the full assembly. "I stand before you today not as a victim or a symbol or a vessel," she said. "I stand before you as a person who has learned to carry her own pain, and who has found others willing to help her carry it when the weight becomes too heavy." Her voice grew stronger, filling the great hall. "That is the gift that humanity has given us," she said. "Not technology or resources or military might, but the simple truth that together we are more than the sum of our suffering." She raised her head high, and her eyes shone with a light that came from within. "Name for myself," she announced. "A human name, because I want to honor the species that saved my life and taught me how to live." She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had walked through darkness and found light on the other side. "My name is Hope," she said, "and I carry it not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever been told that they must suffer alone." The assembly erupted in applause, humans and Valorians standing together, united by the simple power of emotions shared and burdens carried in common. Marcus wiped tears from his eyes and did not care who saw. Later that night, he and Hope stood together on the observation deck, watching the stars spin slowly past, just as they had done so many times before. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he asked. "For seeing me," she said, "when I was invisible. For believing I was worth saving when I did not believe it myself. For teaching me that being loved is not something to fear." Marcus put his arm around her and pulled her close. "Thank you for letting me," he said. They stood in comfortable silence, two people from different worlds who had found in each other something neither had expected. A partner, a friend, a love that transcended species and culture, and all the barriers the universe could place between them. "Do you think we actually changed anything?" Hope asked. "Do you think the galaxy is really different now?" Marcus thought about the Valorians learning to feel, about humans teaching emotional intelligence to species across the stars, about the small acts of kindness an understanding that rippled outward from this moment into an unknowable future. "I think we planted a seed," he said, "and seeds grow, and what grows from this one might be something beautiful beyond imagining." Hope smiled and leaned into his embrace. "That sounds like something a human would say," she said. "It is," Marcus agreed. "We are optimists by nature. We cannot help believing that tomorrow will be better than today." "I think I like being part of a species of optimists," Hope said. "You are not human," Marcus reminded her gently. "No," she agreed, "but I am something new, something that exists because two species learned from each other, something that could not have existed without both of us." She looked up at the stars with wonder in her eyes. "Maybe that is what the future looks like," she said. "Not humans or Valorians, but something better, something that takes the best of both and becomes more than either could be alone." Marcus kissed the top of her head and held her tight. "Together," he said. "Together," she agreed. "That is how we rise." And far above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, witnesses to a story that was only beginning, a story of two species learning to feel and grow and love as one, full of wonders. But in that moment, the greatest wonder of all was simply this: two hearts beating together in the darkness, sharing the weight of existence, finding in each other the strength to hope. And that was enough.